Welcome back to the JavaScript Essential Training Series. I am Mike, your host, and in this tutorial we'll actually be talking about complex conditions inside of JavaScript. So over the last few tutorials we've been looking at conditional statements in JavaScript. We looked at the if, we looked at the else if, we looked at the switch, and then we looked at how we can actually combine and nest if statements inside of JavaScript. Well, in this tutorial we're actually going to look at complex operators in JavaScript, and it's a much better way to actually go about nesting these conditional statements. So in our previous tutorial, we looked at the way that we could actually nest conditional statements inside JavaScript. As I explained in that tutorial, there's much better ways of accomplishing that type of coding inside JavaScript, and that's by using some complex operators. With the operators that are available inside of JavaScript, we can use those operators to put together some very complex condition checking in our coded applications. If you remember back from an earlier tutorial on the operators in JavaScript, we have a group of operators that come in very handy for this type of coding. So we actually looked at comparison operators, which was the double equal, the triple equal, the not equal value or equal type. We looked at the greater than, the less than, the greater than and equal to, or the less than and equal to, and we looked at the ternary operator. And actually, now that we've actually gone through those if statements, you now know exactly what that ternary operator is, because we actually demonstrated a couple ternary conditions as we closed out that if statement tutorial. The ones we're going to actually focus on in this tutorial are the logical operators. That's the and logical operator, the or logical operator, and the not logical operator. These are used most often when combining conditions in a conditional statement to actually make a complex condition. So let's move into our development environment and demonstrate what we talked about in the presentation. All right, so let me go ahead and drop out of our presentation and drop into our development environment. I'm going to confirm we've got the Apache server up and running. I'm going to bring up Sublime Text 3, which will be our editor for the demonstration, and Google Chrome will be my browser that I'll be using. I'm still in section 2 of the tutorial files, and I've got the template.html file loaded. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to do a save as. Let's save this as complex_1.html. Let's go ahead and save that. I'm going to go ahead and bring it up inside of our browser. And we've got nothing there. Perfect. All right, so the first thing I want to do is let's go ahead and give it a title. I'm just going to say complex conditionals. And I'm going to go ahead and put an H3 inside of our container, which also talks about the complex conditionals. And go ahead and close out that H3 tag. Let's go ahead and save those changes. Refresh our browser window. And we are in the complex conditionals file. Excellent. Okay, so using complex conditionals, we can have our application perform some very complex checking as we execute our code. So let's look at some examples of complex conditional coding. First thing I want to do is inside of our container element, I'm going to start with a very, very simple one. I'm going to go ahead and copy this from the exercise file so you don't have to watch me type it. And then we'll actually talk about all the stuff that we're putting in here. I'm just going to come down a couple of lines. Let's put in our script tags first. We actually don't need that text JavaScript anymore because it is optional now with HTML5. And I'm going to come down a few lines. And then inside my script tags, I'm going to go ahead and paste this script that I've set up for this demonstration. You'll notice the first thing I want you to notice, I've got 3 variables that I've set up. I've got a variable with a name, which is Mike. Let's go ahead and take that one out. I've got a variable pass, which is actually numeric, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I got a variable email, which is anywhere@mail.com. And what I've done is I've put in an if statement. And the first thing I want you to notice is that I've got my conditionals inside parentheses. So I've got my if statement enclosed in parentheses. And then inside each condition that I'm looking to match, I've got those in parentheses. So the first thing I'm saying is the name is not equal to Mike, or the password is not equal to 4567. Now we know the name is equal to Mike. So this is actually, we're checking for 2 conditions because we're actually using the or statement, or the or operator. And I'm saying that if name is not equal to Mike, or password is not equal to 4567, then I'm going to do one of the two is true, or I'm going to do both conditions are false. So I'm going to save this change. Now we know the name is equal to Mike, so we know that that's going to come up false. We know the password is not equal to 4567. That's going to come up true. So I've got one true and one false. So when I refresh my browser window, one of the two is true, and we know that's correct because the password is not 4567. If I were to change this, is not equal to 12345, and save that change, now we're saying the name is not equal to Mike, which again is false because it is equal to Mike, or the password is not equal to 12345, and we know that that's false because it is equal to 12345. So now we're going to say both conditions are false. Let's go ahead and save that change. Refresh our browser window. Now you'll see both conditions are false. If I were to take out the not sign and put equals, so I've got the name is equal to Mike and the password. Remember now, when we want to do a comparison, we have to have the double equal signs. Because if I had a single equal sign, I'd actually be assigning the variable that value. So now I've got the password is equal to 12345 and the name is equal to Mike. So both of those conditions are true. So if that's the case, then I'm going to get this first document here. It's going to say one of the conditions is true because actually they're both true. So I save that, come back, refresh my browser window. One of the two is true, and actually both the conditions are true because of the fact that we actually have them both set up as true statements. But we're exercising, the key there is we're exercising our first group of coding, regardless of what that coding would be, because one of those two is true and we're using the OR operator, we're actually going to see a value of true come in and execute the first group of code inside that condition. So one of the key takeaways on this particular demonstration is that not operator. By putting the not operator there, we're basically changing the way we look at the expression, because now we're saying not equal instead of equal. So again, if I have not equal Mike, not equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, both these conditions are false. So if I save the change, refresh the browser window, now they're both going to come up as false. And again, that not operator changes the way we look at the condition inside the statement. So let's look at another example of how we can use these complex operators. All right, so we're going to change our statement a little bit. So let's do a save as. Again, I want you to have all aspects or all copies of these as you go through. I'm going to save this as complex_2.html. Let's go ahead and load that one in our browser. And now what I want to do is I want to make a couple changes to this. The first thing I'm going to do is change the actual complex operator itself. I'm going to change this to the AND operator. So now we're looking for not an OR, but AND. So both of these will have to evaluate true in order to execute that first line of code. So if I say that the name is not equal to Mike and the password is not equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, again, that's not true because they are. So we're actually going to change both of these. I'm going to make these equal and equal. So now I've got the name is equal to Mike and the password is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let's go ahead and save that. Refresh the browser. Now actually both the conditions are true. So both our conditions are true in this particular one. If I were to say that the name, let's change the variable name to Mike1, save that change, refresh the browser, now both conditions are false. And it's actually not that they're both false, because obviously they're not, but because one of them is false and I've used this AND operator, it's actually dropping into the second line of code. What you normally would use this for is like access to your site. So let's go ahead and actually change this statement. I'm going to change this so you've gained access to the site, because this is how you'd actually set up a password check. So I'm going to change that statement. And then I'm going to come down and change the other statement. Either the name or the password is incorrect. I'm going to go ahead and copy this from my exercise file so you don't have to watch me type it. Inside my quotation marks, I'm just going to go ahead and put in there. Got a couple extra characters. So now I said your name or password is incorrect, or you've gained access to the site. So if they're both correct, because we're using the AND operator, I should get this. If one or the other is incorrect, I'm going to get the second line. So I'm going to go ahead and save those changes, refresh my browser window, your name or password is incorrect. And we know that the name's actually incorrect because I've changed it to Mike1. If I take the 1 out, save the change, now they're both going to evaluate to true, so I'm going to execute that first line of code. So I save the change, refresh the browser window, you've gained access to the site. And again, that's because both of those are correct, that we've actually gained access to the site. Now again, what you could do here, I could actually make this a triple equal and change the password. Let's go ahead and put this in quotation marks. So now we're treating this as a text string. I'm going to take out that third equals first off. I'm going to save that change. The first thing you'll notice is this time they're both going to pass. Because again, I do have Mike in the variable name and I do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the pass name. So if I save the change, refresh the browser window, tells me we've gained access to the site. If I add the third equal, and again, now we're looking for an identical comparison. Not only do the values have to be the same, but it has to be the same data type. This is a text data type. We're actually looking for a numeric data type. So if I save that change, refresh my browser window, now it's going to tell me either my name or password's incorrect. We know the password's incorrect because I'm looking for a numeric data type and I've actually passed in a string data type. So again, it's how you use these operators inside these complex comparisons to determine what lines of code are actually executed inside your conditional statement. And again, we can get even more complex than this. And let's go ahead and do that in the next demonstration. Great time to pause, by the way. If you want to go ahead and type this in and work through this, you really should practice these. These are important as you start working on complex applications. You're going to be doing a lot of these complex comparisons. So I'm going to go, let's go ahead and do one more demonstration on how we use this complex comparisons inside of JavaScript. All right, so I want to do save as. Again, I want you to be able to have all copies of these as you go through them. I'm going to save this as complex_3.html. And I'm going to make some pretty significant changes in this one. We're actually going to leave our passwords and variables the way they are, but I want to come down to my if statement, and I'm actually going to add an additional condition. So I'm going to say name is equal to Mike. I'm going to have the password is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to go ahead and take this out. I'm going to take the quotation marks now because we're going to just go back to this numeric value. Save the change. And then I want to add one more condition. And I'm going to say or. So I'm going to use those two pipe symbols. They're right above the enter key, shift and backslash on your keyboard. And inside parentheses, I'm going to say email is equal to, and then I'm going to put in there anywhere at mail.com. Just like we have inside of our variable. So anywhere at mail.com. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually looking at 3 different values, but I'm saying if name is equal to Mike and password is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm going to execute this code. Or if the email is equal to anywhere at mail.com, I'm going to execute this code. So now these two have to pass a true, or this one by itself could pass a true. And let me show you what I mean. I'm going to actually add Mike1 to my variable, and I'm going to add another digit to my password. So now both of these are going to evaluate to true or to false because my name is actually equal to Mike1. My password is actually equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's go ahead and save those changes. But because I have the or here, and the or is actually going to evaluate true, I'm still going to execute this line of code. So again, save the changes. Great time to pause if you want to go ahead and type that in. I'm going to go in and load up the complex_3.html. And you'll see now we've gained access to the site. Even though we only have the email addresses correct, because we had that or operator, it's going to allow us to execute this first line of code because I've got a true inside that one condition. If I made this an and save that change, now it's going to evaluate false. This is false, this is false, this is true. But in order for this to actually execute the first line of code, all 3 of those need to evaluate to true. So when I save the change, I refresh my browser. Now I'm going to get your password is incorrect. Your password or name is incorrect. And again, it's because all 3 of those have to evaluate true in this particular demonstration. And right now, only one of them is. If I actually change this to a 6, I make this a Mike1, I save those changes, refresh my browser. Now we've gained access to the site because all three of them evaluate true. And all I have to do is have one of those fail. I'm going to change the password back to 5. If any one of those three fail because of the way we've set up the complex comparison, the complex conditional, now we're not going to gain access because, again, here the password's incorrect. So again, you can do a lot of things with these complex comparisons, complex conditionals. I highly recommend you practice these, understand how the AND operator works, how the OR operator works, how that NOT operator is very important because you can reverse the conditions that you're actually looking for inside your conditional statements. So just understand how those all work together. I'm just going ahead and putting everything back the way it was. Understand how all that stuff works together so that you can actually design these complex conditionals so that you can get exactly what you're looking for in your application. And do remember, each one of these needs to be in their own set of parentheses. So each conditional check that we're doing needs to be enclosed in a set of parentheses. You'll notice that each one of these is enclosed in parentheses, and the actual if statement itself is enclosed in parentheses. There's my opening parentheses, there's the closing parentheses. And again, I've just added the space for clarity. It doesn't really need to be there. I'm just doing that so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing. Everything is not so bunched up on each other. So I hope that explains complex conditional statements. We use them a lot in JavaScript. Get very familiar with those greater than, those equal tos, those triple equal signs where we're not only looking for a value, but for the exact type of data, and make certain you understand how the ands and the ors work. And you'll be able to zip through these like there's no tomorrow. We do use them a lot in JavaScript. You'll see them in a lot of the future tutorials as we start, especially when we start doing some of the projects and developing some JavaScript applications. You'll see where I use these quite a bit. And you can actually see in this first one, this demonstration right here, where we could actually use this to check a username, a password, and an email address to confirm access into a particular area of your site or a particular area of your application. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot from it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.